With us today is Norman Christopher, and Norman has been in this space for a long time, and I think he really brings a unique perspective because he's taught a lot of classes, especially in business schools, on sustainability, but he's also worked in the private sector and some of the big corporate settings as well. So he really has a leg in both areas and has a really good perspective on this. So with that, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to Norman. He's going to give us a presentation, and then we're going to go into our discussion after that. Norman, it's all yours.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Lauren, and everyone listening this morning to our discussion on sustainability skill sets and jobs in the marketplace, and it's been a journey. I've been at Grand Valley State University now for the last 10 years in a great learning curve. But more importantly, who are we? Grand Valley State University, and I'll refer to it as GVSU as we chat, is located in West Michigan, primarily on the Allendale campus in downtown Grand Rapids, but we also have many other facilities. So we have 8 colleges and 25,000 students. And I will start by saying that sustainability is a value at the university. And that puts it in a very unique perspective versus sustainability activities and programs. So we're going to discuss this emerging sector of sustainability and where are the jobs and how many of them are there and what are regional and local perspectives for the future, specifically for students as they graduate. So as we start today, we're going to take a look at these jobs, but we're going to first walk us through a ladder of skill sets to get there. And so all of this really starts with a discussion about what kind of a world do we live in. And this world we live in has had its roots of quote unquote the new economy that goes all the way back to primarily the 1990s. And it's been here in West Michigan actually much longer than that with companies like Herman Miller and Steelcase. And they got started with being green probably back in the really 1950s, but then really advocated it very strongly with environmental sustainability in the 1970s. So I'm not going to go through all of these characteristics, but I do want to say what's the definition of the quote-unquote new economy? Well, it really, some have called it the green economy, some have called it the sustainability economy, and some have called it the clean technology economy. So I'm using new in kind of like a paraphrase because it has elements of all of it. So some of the key dynamics, however, I've highlighted there. First is change. I come from the old economy, slow and stable. Now everything is extremely fast and dynamic. Development cycles used to be very predictable. Now they're extremely volatile, very disruptive, and very fast. Processes that I used to know and learn were quite linear, but now everything is systems related, very dynamic, and most of the sustainability processes are connected. The models for businesses and organizations certainly is changing today. We have a lot of empowerment and collaboration today versus the command and control model of top-down. The skill set area, hello, is really the key area of change. It used to be very much degree-based by hiring students with specific degrees. Now we see it trending and really becoming an area related to multi-skilled learning and specific outcomes and skill sets. I come from cradle to grave mode. Now today is life cycle and cradle to cradle. I also see now where success is not necessarily short-term, but is more long-term value creation. And how do you do that? So continuing on, employment used to be quite secure. I think as students look today, I see a lot of them starting their own businesses and working for smaller to medium-sized enterprises. Technology has shifted from a lot of effort around mechanization to digitization today. Scope of activities tends to be very local and regional today with a global impact. Organizations have to be networked versus hierarchical and top-down. And then core values, I think, are shifting from success at all costs to really honesty, truth, innovation, and accountability. So I left you with that little quote at the bottom there. The only thing constant is change. So as we start to look at the question is, well, who is responsible for education and training today? So if you look at it from a business perspective, it can be seen that really only about 1 out of 5 U.S. employees receive formal education training within the last 5 years from their employer. That's kind of striking. On the smaller to medium-sized enterprises, affectionately known as SMEs in the marketplace, there's a concern that if they train their employees, they're going to lose them. But actually the opposite is true, because if you don't train them, you really definitely will lose them. If you look at an academic perspective, half the colleges would say that they think they're very effective at preparing students for work in the job market, but then again, only 11% of the businesses agree that they're doing a good job at it. You can't rely on government because that training and education is dropping. And so the result has been, just at the end of last year, you've got 5 million unfilled jobs, even though 9 million people were unemployed and looking for the work. So I think the general consensus is that the private and academic sectors are not equipped now for the positions and organizations needed to be filled. So who has the role and responsibilities now? And if you take a look at the role of higher education, I think the major part of this slide is that higher ed has to be looked at as developers. And that's developers of lots of different areas: technology, regional development. I think we look at ourselves as a regional university in that space because we have many facilities and satellite. I think you see a lot of cluster development around industrial and retail markets. Certainly the idea of place-based development is true for us, but then at the star over there is this talent development, and this is something that we're taking very seriously now, is that talent development has to be a continuum of lifelong learning, STEM enrichment, continual professional education, a lot of innovative format and deliveries, such as what we're doing today virtually, as well as distance learning. So then, if this is the characteristics of the new economy and some of the roles that higher ed needs to be playing in the future, the question is, what's the skill set staircase that can help? So very briefly, this is a ladder or a pyramid of skill sets that is very critical here because each one builds on the other. And the first level, as you can see, deals with personal. And I think we sometimes don't spend enough time in that space because it really represents our own DNA. In other words, what are the values and beliefs we bring to ourselves, whether we're at a college or university or in the marketplace? Secondly is the academic, and that's really the knowledge or discipline or what educational sustainable development focus or concentration area do you have. Third are baseline skills or basic skills that every employer in the marketplace requires, and we'll spend a little time on that. The fourth area really starts the importance of the journey on the ladder because the question is, what technical or differentiated skill do I have? And then the fifth one is, where have I applied it? And so steps 4 to 5 are really critical in the marketplace today, in addition to a degree. And then the question now becomes is, what are some of the new leadership skills that employers are looking for? And then can all of this lead to a job? And the answer is yes, it can. And there are about 3.5 million of these, but they've been only called, quote, green jobs nationally. So we could take a look at some of those. But first, let's take a look at these skill sets a little bit more in depth. So personal skills deal with things like integrity and honesty, and sometimes I just think we overlook and assume that's a space that everybody's comfortable in. How professional is the work I do? How accountable is the work I offer, and does the buck stop with me? Do I assume responsibilities for the work, whether it's totally complete? Do I ask people about the work before it's delivered? How reliable am I? And then what attitude do I display for the work? And here's one that I think we're all continuing to be on the journey. How willing am I to learn? And that's something over the last 10 years that I've spent a lot of time on because I've found there are a lot of spots that I need to learn more than maybe what my profession has brought me to so far. The next level is really this academic level, and I must say that I'll use GVSU as an example. What's interesting is sustainability is a value at Grand Valley, but we don't offer a sustainability degree. And that's the question that I think we have 8 colleges. So all of our education for sustainable development bubbles up from the 8 colleges. So you would see in our liberal arts and sciences, natural resource management as a major and minor, environmental studies, which is a brand new area, as a minor. But then you would see emphasis areas like the College of Business, where I'm associated with, and help in the teaching of students that could graduate with an MBA with an emphasis in sustainability. And then we also offer a liberal studies degree with an emphasis in sustainability. We also offer certificates programs. I have a degree in chemistry, but I don't have a certificate in green chemistry, and that's probably one of the more needed sciences moving forward. We also offer graduate certificates in public and nonprofit administration, and one of the biggest areas, since we grow food on our own campus, is a certificate in sustainable food systems. So if you add up our sector, there are over 200 courses now offered at GVSU that have sustainability-related curriculum across the triple bottom line of environmental, social, and economic impact. So third is this area of workplace or basic skills, and I'm not going to go through all of them, but this is a very important place because, as you can see, the source of the workplace skills are the association of colleges and employers. And the number one area that everyone still struggles with is communications. It's still the number one interdisciplinary skill set needed. And those skill sets now are getting very, very specific in terms of verbal, written, social media, presentation. So we're learning a lot more about communications, and interestingly enough, in our marketing and communications classes, public relations and advertising, sustainability is used because how do you message sustainability, and we're learning with our own school how to do a better job of that. So work ethic is important. Analytical and problem solving, you can see, but the interpersonal skills of listening, leading, participating, sharing, building consensus, and all of these now, and of course how flexible and adaptable are students in different workplace environments, these are all now workplace skills that all students need to have. So every student here gets exposed to workplace skills in addition to their degree. Where I want to spend a little bit of time, and not all of it, but is in this area of technical skills. And these technical skills are really sustainability related. And let me just highlight a few. You've seen green chemistry, and that to me is an important technical skill set. So I'll give you a couple of examples where students are being asked, not do they just have a degree in chemistry, but do they have a certificate in green chemistry, because the marketplace is now demanding it. That's an important one. Risk assessment is another one. We all have strategic risks within our business, but they could come from a community perspective, they could come from a shareholder perspective. So risk assessment is now becoming a very important technical skill. Certainly life cycle analysis, resiliency and climate mitigation and adaptation is very important, but we've chosen to move towards resiliency. So given all of the state of what's happening to the environment, how quickly can we bounce back? So we actually use resiliency as a terminology here on our campus. Social responsibility and citizenship are critical. Another one is environmental management systems centered around ISO 14001. And then last is a technical skill around sustainable agricultural and urban farming, since we now have our own sustainable agricultural project. So those are specific skill sets that industry is looking for. So if you move that on, now the question is, where could I find a job? Well, we actually have people now if you look at green chemistry, moving into green cleaning. Those are companies out there that have shifted their chemistry to green chemistry for cleaning, and we use primarily all green cleaners here on campus through, and I can tell you the companies that we have here are employing GVSU students. Another one is sustainable supply chain management. I work a lot in that area. Risk assessment is a primary one of a tool that can be used to improve customer, producer, and customer supply chain management. So that's an important one. Training, we do a lot of that here because the workplace needs to know these new tools. A lot of it now is moving into neighborhood where you would see social entrepreneurship, social innovation, technical skills now working into neighborhood revitalization where those skills are needed among some of the communities and neighborhoods. Another one, of course, is reporting through carbon inventories and greenhouse gases, which our university is signed off on. And another certificate now is being offered around food systems, where you would build upon our garden, but not only that, is looking at things like what's the difference between organic and natural food, and what do you grow. So that sort of gives you an idea of where these applied opportunities in the marketplace. And I just want to spend a moment now on this management, because management, and I've come through that in several different capacities in companies, I have never seen these types of leadership skill sets being required today. And clarifying is one that you'd say, well, gee, that sounds easy, but then how many situations do we face each day that are fairly cloudy? How can you make cloudy situations clear? So clarifiers are really critical today in management. A lot of the learning we experience here is pretty immersive. It's taking real-world opportunities that are pretty sticky, difficult. Some call them the wicked problems of sustainability. I kind of changed that around to terrific learning opportunities. But you do that with others, and others don't necessarily come from the same backgrounds and disciplines as you. Transparency is critical. So is mob organizing. How quickly can you gain through social media people that can be tied to your cause? Dilemma flipping is really the issue of glass half empty or glass half full. I know a lot of glass half empty people. I look for the glass half full. How can you take things apart and put them back together with what's necessary? That's constructive depolarization. Life cycle thinking I learn about every day. It's cradle to cradle, not cradle to grave. Common creating deals with various problems, but then looking what is the common denominator over all of those that can be incorporated. And design thinking brings different viewpoints of interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary perspectives. So that's where I see some of the leadership moving tomorrow into the marketplace. So that's a lot going on for a student today. So the question really becomes now, I think we really need to start thinking differently. And to do that is really a challenge, and it's pretty transformative. And I see our students now with faculty and our staff trying to learn, how do we think about addressing these issues that we face in the marketplace that actually have been with us for longer than we think, that can be seen in the new economy, really now starting to look like, well, gee, it isn't going away. We see the elements changing in the marketplace. How can we collectively begin to think differently? And I'm going to ask maybe a question in a minute, because we've kind of gone through this before I get to the jobs section. Is this work came a while ago and has been used several times about what are the real tenets of this sustainability thinking. And I think the things that I've learned from it is, number one, it's pretty long-term. It's not short-term fixes. We've been pretty good at those, but it's how do you take sustainability and really look at long-term solutions and value creation. So it's not just short-term performance. I think the thing that another thing I've learned here, and I spent a lot of time with, is systems. I think we've all tried to approach this without a lot of connectivity. And so design thinking really helps that, and we've now embraced that here at the university by using one of the leaders that came from the furniture industry that's now entered academia here, higher education at GVSU, to bring that skill set. So design thinking really helps in understanding systems. I think this recognition of limits I call resource management. I think we get that today. Protecting nature, another way to look at that is stewardship. This next area of transforming business as usual really anticipates disruptive change. And I think that is a significant driver where sustainability is really critical, because the change that's being required today is not a short-term fix. It is a long-term solution, and you don't get to it without understanding limits and systems. I think this area of fairness I can broaden a little bit. I think one of the tenets of this deals with fairness, social justice, and well-being, you can broaden it to how do we look at service to others as now being an important part of our offering. And again, the creativity, innovation, and empowerment that comes along with this has to be embraced as well. So now, with that as a background, which is a lot in a short period of time, the question is, where are these jobs? So from a government perspective, they did come up with 2 surveys, and you could see that it was the most updated one that I've been able to find. It is called Green Goods and Services, and you can get it from bls.gov/GDS, but it did do a lot of in-depth work. It was really started in the 2009 to 2010 timeframe, so it's a bit old, but trending very much here in this same alignment. So when you add it all up, that was fairly in-depth. They looked at over 300 industries, but only 5 primary areas. But they did come up with roughly 2.5% to 3% of total employment was related to how the government defined green goods and services. So when you look at it, private sector is leading the public sector, so it's about 3 to 1 from this survey work, which is completely available. So when you drop down, where are these jobs specifically related to green goods and services? About 500,000 of them were in manufacturing. But the 2 highlighted of construction and professional and technical had the highest growth. So actually construction, and you could think lead construction and green construction, that was a key one. We have actually here 19 LEED certified building projects just on our own campus. So that construction is also closing in on about 500,000 people. Professional and technical is about 400,000 people. Administrative and waste, and I can't speak to how that was combined, is about 300,000. Transportation and warehousing, very significant in supply chain, is about 250,000, and then trade is about, and you can see it with all the trade going on related to sustainable trade globally, is about 225,000. So all the other areas, I didn't list them, were less than 100,000, but that work is available. What's interesting though, the public sector, which has about 1 in 4 of these jobs, a lot of them, about 400,000 of that 886,000 are at a local level. The state is at 248,000, so local and state is much higher than the federal government, which speaks to the fact that a couple of points I'll make later on is one of the real key tenets of sustainability now is the local and regional development, and we see that now in the employees that are actually doing this work. So when you look at the green goods and services, or GGS, what came out of it fairly quickly were very strong environmental employment. Certainly the renewable energy technologies, energy efficiency, pollution, or P2 as everybody used to refer to it, recycling, but that's really gone way beyond now to things like we do for waste minimization and really zero waste. You get the whole area of being able to understand climate inventory under all your scope emissions. But then also important were the agricultural piece, and we're very strong here in West Michigan. We're an agricultural state, and it's one of our 3 or 4 major initiatives at a state level. But that's bringing in forestry and all the effort around protecting the Great Lakes. So that quickly was what they offered. So when you carry it on a little further and ask, okay, where are these jobs? What you find is that on a broad basis, this, again, all comes from work and surveys from several combined, both on a national level, is there is some good news. And this sort of speaks to the fact of all companies, and this work came from Careers in Sustainability and Green Biz, which I listened to quite a bit, and they just had a presentation on this, is that 32% of their surveyed companies reported that they were seeking out dedicated sustainability professionals. So what that is saying is that on the horizon now, whether you call them sustainability jobs, green jobs, new economy jobs, they are becoming more in demand. And that's an important, and I would say not a trend, it's becoming a change force. So what's more interesting is not only are they looking for professionals, sustainability professionals, 20% are an entirely new position, and that actually is more good news. So if you look very quickly on where some of those jobs are, strategy development is one. That's really sustainability planning, and I can speak to how many of our students are used as interns even today for companies like Consumers Energy, which are large organizations and utilities that are also now beginning their own sustainability journey. Another most important area are those that know how to do survey work, sustainability assessments, surveys, and I can throw in one more skill set that's really important today is GIS and GPS mapping, ARC mapping, and most of our students now for the work we do also have to be trained in that. Certainly energy efficiency in facilities. I would throw in waste and also stretch it to what I would call environmental impact assessments. Lots of education and training for sure by the nonprofits. A lot about marketing and communications. We're going to talk about that as being probably still the #1 area is how do you communicate this effectively both to the marketplace as well as to shareholders and stakeholders. And then there's this other one, which I think is really important for new students. You're going to say, well, this is great. I don't have all of the experience here. But look at the importance of cross-functional project teams and working with peers. Students can do a lot if they do their project work successfully. So that's just a quick snapshot of what the demands are starting to come from the marketplace on these opportunities. So let me just see here. I've got to keep going here a little bit on the, all right, here we go. So now the question is, can I drop it one step even further by looking at just West Michigan? So we've done this. So this is a cascading of what is globally, what's the current state of national business, and then what's happening with our skill set. Well, in West Michigan, I can tell you that our Right Place Economic Development now will refer to sustainability, and they do all the economic development for West Michigan. They will refer to sustainability and applied sustainability best practices being the DNA of West Michigan. And I have to tell you that I have not heard that before until recently, which means that it's now becoming ingrained just about in everything we do. So GVSU conducted its own survey, and you could see about 90% of those, and they were NGOs and businesses just in our area, that we went out with a skill set and said, okay, if you're going to be hired, what are the desired skill sets that you will be looking for in a new student or a young professional? So you could see 35% plus of them already had sustainability jobs within their organization. And so their interest was high. 60% cut across and said, we already employ one or more important. So there was only a very small fraction that weren't using some of these best practices already within their operation. So then we tried to say, okay, out of all of these, what are the primary skill sets that employers were hiring? #1, and no surprise, environmental impact assessment. That means taking waste, air, water, land, and energy, looking at the impact metrics, converting them also through a greenhouse gas inventory that then say, could you develop an impact assessment on what I am doing environmentally? And I would say that's become a backbone of many companies, whether you're a manufacturer or whether you're an NGO, it's what's my footprint? So that's another way it's being expressed is what is your environmental footprint? Interesting, what comes up second is there has to be an economic impact for everything we do. And I think we're learning better tools, but I would say all of my work has to have a positive impact assessment. And so far we've been able to do that. Renewable and alternative energy is critical, but look how important is law and policy. That means what's coming from advocacy, regulations for us at a local and state level. We still have some catch up to do. We do have do not have a formalized energy policy. So all this says, boy, some states already have that. We don't, but we're filling it with these best practices. So that's another way to go. Look at how important now social impact and assessment comes, and that can be seen now by communities and neighborhoods saying we have to be self-sustaining on our own, which is a whole new area of social entrepreneurship. Yes, climate change mitigation and resiliency is important, but so is the food systems and agriculture. So I just think that sort of speaks to a very important level now of the skill sets here in West Michigan. So now the question is, are there interdisciplinary skill sets that can be combined with sustainability skill sets to get a job? And yes, there are. And here they are very quickly. You've got communication still being number one, but so is organization, and it gets to the adaptability and the flexibility of all of this in terms of new employees coming into an organization. They expect that. Importance with planning, we can already see where that's being connected. And now leadership. And that leadership for a new employee could be, have you led teams before? And again, if you do your work here as a student or as a young professional, you can plug immediately into project management. Sure, data analysis, big data, and I spent a lot of time with that on how do you assimilate and collect and make meaningful reports from all of this. And for sure, the other skill sets, but look at how important now problem solving. That's analytical, critical, and holistic systems thinking. That's design thinking, and all of that comes now to be of employer interest. Certainly building relationships and being very creative for the work you do. So now, okay, I'm having a little difficulty here moving to the next slide. Okay, so then the question now says, talk to me about the jobs. Well, I have to tell you, this work, I listened very intently recently to Green Biz and a couple of others that are starting to spend a lot of time in this space saying, where are the sustainability jobs? And what I'm gleaning from this is some pretty good news. Up in the upper left, look at that survey demographics. The large corporations are really entering a major change force, and that is a growing and aging employee base. And so what they're now going to do, this is going to catch up with them. And so give you an example, in our own city here, Grand Rapids, they're looking at an aging force of employees, not only those that work directly for the city of Grand Rapids, but also for the police force. So a lot of these municipal sectors, this really fits, as well as a lot of the larger corporations. If you switch it over to the upper right-hand side, these are the smaller organizations, and that's the good news too, is you now see a high degree of people being employed who have less than 3 years, 4 to 5 years, or even less than 10 years experience. So their workforce is quite young, and they're demanding now the skill sets that we've just discussed. And then if you add it all up, over the last 2 years, the trend is beginning to see, can we see some actual increase in overall headcount? Yes, predominantly you still see people remaining the same, but you certainly have more people hiring now than you are releasing employees or starting to decrease the size of their workforces. So now let's shift towards the end of this and talk about, give me some examples of jobs. So I've done a lot of work, and here are the titles that sort of jump out at you. Specialist, analyst, coordinator, planning, and manager. So if you were entering the workforce, you would see these jobs, but here's the catch-22 in it. Some have direct sustainability titles in them, but others do not. And that's the catch-22 when you look at sustainability jobs. People will say, well, gee, I see some, but let's just look at environmental planning. That doesn't have the word sustainability, but it's all about environmental impact assessment. So what they would see is that's a trend to a job maybe that's in this space but doesn't have sustainability directly to the title. You might find a training manager, but then part of that training has to be related to environmental and social impact assessments. Like, oh, so you now have to take a look at this in a much more broader way than just trying to look at a job and saying, oh, I can see where I would have a fit to that job. So but these menus come from real live jobs. So I did not create these. These were just given as examples to let everybody know that they're out there, and I'll give you a game plan in a minute for how to look at them. So here's some more. You will see them in associate positions, project management that we just talked about, a lot in engineering, and even I threw in the one of physician, of co-director of the Rhode Island Chronic Care Sustainability Initiative. Even at a physician level, you're starting to see sustainability creep in. You will find sustainability-related jobs in another category that doesn't have anything. We have a fairly high degree here of biologists, and they're in the sustainable development space every day, but that isn't necessarily seen in the title. So hydrologists, biologists, economists all have aspects of sustainability. And yes, you do see sustainability jobs, and you will see them as engineers, coordinators. That's typical for colleges and universities. We do have those here on our campus as well. So what's the message? The message seems to me pretty clear. Lots of opportunities available, but only some may have the title. So you got to go deeper by looking at these marketplace opportunities and where the job responsibilities actually fit. And I think you'll find that many of these have probably sustainability responsibilities that are 25% or more of that job position. So here's some job postings. And these I took straight out of LinkedIn in January. So I think this is kind of interesting because it kind of goes through all the sectors, public, private, cross academia. Yes, they're there as well, but just take a look. The first two are really from social media and software, Facebook and VM, and of course that's virtual management ware, and that's critical now. But look, we also have retail, and UBS is a financial services group. And they're not looking at companies that have equity research related to sustainability. And of course, everybody's probably aware of the Dow Jones Sustainability Index. But look at the nonprofit and consulting that could be from the U.S. Green Building Council, and then smaller NGOs and consulting firms. And then we have the city of Milwaukee. So the message here is they cut across all aspects of sustainability in many different market sectors. So as I leave, maybe we can look very quickly at some collective comments. These comments come from a group of CEOs that lead our businesses here in West Michigan. Not going to go through all of these, but look at how some of these are all CEOs, by the way, presidents of companies. I was pleased to just take some really good notes at a meeting that we had at a Michigan level. And look how important some of the things we talked about have been. It kind of validates the discussion. Number one, relationships are keys. This is no longer the me, myself, and I effort. It's all about connectedness. I like the second one of no politics, no fanfare, no only results. That represents such a strong work ethic. And Lauren, I've shared with you that I've been in the space for 10 years, and I have not yet got stopped by a political advocacy issue, because I always look for the common ground in the space where the applied sustainability will work. Another one is I like this idea of citizenship. It goes well beyond partnerships. It goes well beyond social responsibility. And I think that is being now embraced by more companies that recognize themselves and organizations as, if I'm a citizen in the community where I live, then I must also help solve those long-term issues as well as opportunities. Interestingly enough, doing better is not enough to win. You got to strive to do your best every day. I think the idea that skill sets being disruptive speaks to the fact that we're in a world of fast dynamic change and adaptability, and that's a must for all of us. Current talent is the new currency. And I think that speaks to how we're even going to get this into businesses and organizations and cities and neighborhoods. It's the new currency, talent. We've spoken about the importance of inter and interdisciplinary thinking for innovation and creativity. And finishing up here, a couple more. I think this rethink, I left a little discussion slide. I got to think about rethinking everything you did, and that was such a strong emphasis to me about how important the tenets of sustainability are. This comes from our governor himself, who says that I want to see relentless positive action. He is not a glass half empty governor. He is a glass half full. So he wants to see relentless, which means nonstop positive action against these very difficult systems. So accountability and truth matters. I think you see that represented by the desire for honesty and transparency. You can't be a jack of all trades. You got to learn and master these skill sets. I think another message here, I continue to get mentored and coached on a daily basis by many, and I think that's important for all of us. We need to have some coaches that help us through this. And the two last ones that are there kind of like are really, to me, very formative. The future view shapes the future you. What that means is how you and we and me view tomorrow will shape what we do today. And I like this. It's been said to me many times, if it's going to be done, someone's going to do it, and I see that. And that gets into this whole area of initiative empowerment. We just had Patrick Doyle, the CEO of Domino's, on the Grand Valley campus, and I said to him, give me a little recipe. And he said, I can. Give me someone with great attitude, great work ethic, and I'm going to tell you they got a chance for a great job success. So that to me was an important perspective. So as we end this, now the question becomes, what's the recipe to get me a job? Well, I can tell you that I think everyone needs a discipline plan. It's hard work, it takes time. So what I tried to do here is to say, okay, it's not like when I look for a job when I first left college. This really has a different perspective to it. So certainly number one is look for websites with those sustainability organization leaders. We have them here, and you can see their job postings. But don't forget the small to medium-sized enterprises there. They're a high growth engine for these as well. So you'll have the large and the small company on their websites now advocating we need these skill sets. I think a second one is certainly online. I was amazed, and I'll leave you with a few resources on where these jobs are. And there are probably 6 or 8 of them that collect these on a pretty much a regional and local basis. And we can get in now on a Michigan basis and find these jobs. I think LinkedIn does a pretty good job of doing that. But then the word of mouth to me is still a very, very critical area. A lot of jobs come from our students who drop by my office and say, I want a sustainability job. And by the way, that is my #1 marker here for the work I do, is I have to report out how many students coming through our office in our university can find these jobs. So I have a separate tracking mechanism that it's not foolproof, but boy, we're starting to build up where these students are becoming hired. So that networking, and I get them in there and try to help them network themselves through both companies as well as trade associations. But this fourth one about creating your own is another important one. We can work now where students and young professionals will actually do project work for these companies and grow themselves into a job by doing important work to show that they have initiative in a lot more of those skill sets. So now this is just a quick list of where these job resources are. They're available for everybody. And that's where I got a lot of these real life examples from. You'll find me on LinkedIn, but you'll also find out there that there are lots of other companies that are looking for these jobs as well. So I'm going to leave you with just one last little piece here, and that's this idea of skill sets. And it's a journey. It's a journey for all of us. I revisit this staircase all the time, but I haven't been able to leap over any of these because I've had to go back to this basic 6-step process, because everybody wants to see change, but you can't get through change by going through the stair steps. So I sometimes have to walk back up the stairs myself. But when you get to the top of it, and we now can show students with jobs, they've walked away with this lifelong learning that deals with new thinking, new processes, new best practices, new skill sets, and a job in a new economy. So that's just a quick review, but thank you, and I'd like to engage in any specific questions that anyone might have.